In this video, I'll introduce how to estimate the cost of equity using the market model following the CAPM approach. In order to run the market model, you have to have the information for the daily stock return and the daily broad market index return. Therefore, we have to first download this information from CRISP within our selected time horizon. In this case, it's from fiscal year of 2007 to the fiscal year of 2011. All the downloaded data are included in the data tab highlighted in red named CRISP raw COE. So once we copied over the downloaded data, the next task is to use the daily price to compute what is the daily return for Caterpillar. So since the trading frequency is on a daily basis, I simply use the log return to compute the daily return. And once you computed the daily return for Caterpillar, now you can use a combination of S&P return and this computed daily return for Caterpillar to estimate the beta from the market model. So there are two different ways to estimate beta in the market model. The first way is simply plot a scatter plot between these two columns. In this scatter plot, the horizontal axis is S&P return, and the vertical axis is the daily return of Caterpillar. And once you plot a scatter plot, the next task is to estimate a trend line based on this scatter plot. Since, as you see, the relationship between S&P and Caterpillar returns are roughly linear, therefore you can just simply fit a linear trend line on this scatter plot and then estimate the relationship between these two return series. And the slope of this estimate give you the beta or the systematic risk for Caterpillar. The second way is simply to run a slope function where the y-axis is the daily stock return of Caterpillars. Oops, let's try it again. And select the y-axis. Y-axis is the S&P return. And once you do that, you should arrive at very similar estimate for beta to match the estimate in the trend line. Okay, once you estimate the beta, the next goal is to plug the beta back into CAPM model to estimate what is the cost of equity or the required rate of return for a Caterpillar. Assuming the risk-free rate is 1%, CAPM also requires us to plug in the value for expected market return. And since if your cost of equity is on the annual basis, your expected market return also needs to be on the annual basis. So that means we have to use the daily market return to estimate what is the annualized market return. So how do you estimate the annual market return? You can use the database function. So that means we first have to use the year function to extract the year stamp for each of the daily trading dates. And then once we clear the year stamp column, then we can use the database function to apply limitation to the year variable to restrict to year 2007, for example, and then compute what is the daily average return for S&P in 2007. And once we compute the daily return for S&P, then we can run simulation for S&P throughout our time horizon. So we're using a data table, one-dimensional data table, to simulate what is the average daily return for S&P in each of the fiscal years from 2007 to 2011. And here are the results. But since the unit for the market return is on a daily basis, we have to annualize it to become annualized returns. So in order to compute what is the annualized return, I compute what is the compounded daily return and compounded for 252 trading days and the -1. And this gives us what is the corresponding annualized return based on the daily return from each of the fiscal year. And once you compute what is the annualized return for S&P from 2007 to 2011, then you can take average of all the annualized return to compute what is the average annualized return. And as you see, the result here, the average annual return is only 3.475%. And based on our understanding of the stock market, this annualized return is a little too low for S&P. And then retrospectively, we look at the input variables for this return. We see that it includes the fiscal year of 2011. So as we know, 2008 is the peak of financial crisis, and therefore the market return in this year is especially low. So that means this is an outlier. We probably should exclude it from our calculation for average annualized return. By excluding this outlier and then recalculate the average return, annualized return, we computed 12.59%. And this is more in line with our expectation for broad market stock return, which is roughly around 10%. So if you use the historical average annual return for S&P in the past 50 years, then that's roughly 10%. So if your estimated annualized market return is between 9% and 13%, that's more in the ballpark. So in this case, 12.59% is okay. So now we have estimated the annualized return. We'll just link our expected market return to this estimated annualized return, and then use this one as the input variable for CAPM, and then compute CAPM that give us what is the estimated cost of equity for Caterpillar. In this case, it is estimated to be 15.06%.